No, actually, we're running ahead because I planned on being at least an hour behind schedule. So technically, from my perspective, we're a half hour ahead of schedule, even though according to the agenda, we're a half hour late. So
Way to manage expectations.
that's right.
That's great.
Absolutely. Sometimes you set the bar too high, you just got to lower it retroactively. Once again, I want to thank Honda for the lunch. Thank you all for sticking with us throughout the agenda. We talked about some existing activities on the city level with sustainability and resiliency, and then also specific fleet activities. Now we'd like to talk a little bit about the future. So we've got an expert panel up here in front of you today. We've got Timothy, I call him Timothy Littman from ITS at UC Berkeley. We've got Shengfeng Wang from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and we've got Bill Van Amberg from CalSTART. So we're going to start off the sequence with Tim and Bill talking a little bit about the future and where they see we're heading and how we can get there, and then Shengfeng's going to tell us a little bit about how we might be able to pay for it. So with that, I'd like to invite Timothy Littman to the podium.
Thank you very much, Richard, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. And yes, I work with ITS Berkeley, which is one of 4 ITS Institutes of Transportation Studies around the University of California. Actually started my work at ITS Davis, where I met Kevin Nesbitt in about 1992 or something. So we've been at this for a while. But it's getting really exciting. A lot of fun things going on. And I'm also now a research affiliate with the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. So I'm going to quickly touch on 4 topics. One is a new Department of Energy effort that's actually a 5-lab study and talking about the future. This is exactly what we're thinking about, the future. And so I'll touch on that, and then I'll talk a little bit about a couple of EV infrastructure programs that you might have heard of, but I'll maybe fill in a few more details than are available on at least the websites I've seen. And then, of course, Chung Feng will cover the Air District program, so I'll leave that for him. I'll give a quick update on the hydrogen station development efforts and what's going on, especially in Northern California. And then I'll make a little plug for an Energy Commission project, which is called NorthCat, which is an education and training center that we're now getting going with a number of partners. And there's some of these flyers out there that you can pick up if you want, or mostly just look us up online. So there's a new program. It's a 3-year program for the Department of Energy. We call it Smart Mobility, and we're hoping that's a good name in the current federal administration. I just got back from Washington, D.C. If it was called Clean Mobility or Low Carbon Mobility, it would probably be on the chopping block, but maybe Smart Mobility will survive. So we know we have money this year. Beyond that, we're not totally sure, but we're hoping that this program continues. And the idea here is that it's clear that transportation and mobility are changing now in pretty fundamental ways. We have new modes, people using Uber, Lyft, car sharing, and so forth. And there's, of course, these overlays of connected autonomous vehicles came up, I think Bill Zoller mentioned, which, contrary to some reports a few years ago where we were all going to be driving autonomous or riding in autonomous vehicles, 5 years from now, I think we've all rolled that back a little bit. But it's coming in various forms, and there's all these different levels of automation. And there's multimodal aspects to this. So the idea is there's these 5 pillars, and there's feedback between all the pillars. There's a lab that leads each pillar, but then there are various labs that collaborate on these things. And I'm involved in the alternative fuel infrastructure pillar. And the goals are to identify what infrastructure is required to support future mobility systems. How can next generation fueling and charging infrastructure enable adoption of low carbon transportation? And what are the costs and benefits, and where should infrastructure investments be made, thinking about the future and thinking about systems where we might not have private ownership of vehicles as much as shared use systems, again, connected autonomous and so forth. And so actually, one question is, how many of you have used an Uber or Lyft in the last 2 weeks? Okay, about half the crowd. And one of the lab studies suggests that when we get to these shared use mobility systems, the environmental benefits could be 60% reduction in energy use or up to 200% increase, depending on how that's deployed. Because we could have 0 occupancy vehicles out there running around without people in them, dropping people off at work and then going back home and so forth. So how many of you think that connected autonomous vehicles would lead to an increase in emissions? Okay, a few hands. How many of you think it will lead to a decrease in emissions? Okay. couple hands. So a lot of uncertainty, right? No one really knows. Okay. How many of you heard that the major IOUs in California all have electric vehicle charge programs approved by the Public Utilities Commission? Okay, spattering of hands. So the details of this program were announced by Dave Almeida from PG&E at a Bay Area EV Council meeting. And the program rules have evolved from an earlier version where we thought they might be putting in about 2,500 charge points. We now have heard that they have approval to put in 7,500 charge points in the PG&E service territory in this initial phase. These details are not yet available on the PG&E website, but you can sign up to learn more, is what, and Matt Elke in the back. Matt, would you identify yourself real quick? Matt's also involved in the North Cat effort, and he's been doing research on this, and he went to the PG&E website, and you can't really get this kind of detail yet. So I don't know if we're going to make these slides available, Richard, to the participants, but if anyone wants more details, I have these slides, and I can send them to you. But basically, the details are that this is targeted at multi-unit dwellings and workplaces. 15% of the charge points have to be in disadvantaged communities. And it'll run for about 3 years, and the first chargers are supposed to go in late this year. So how many of you have interest in additional charging infrastructure for either multi-unit dwelling or workplace applications? Okay, so another smattering of hands. So I'd encourage you to go to the PG&E website and at least kind of sign up for more information, and then you'll get that information as it becomes available. We don't have too much time to go through the details here, but there are 2 different models. One is where PG&E would own the charger and maintain it and operate it. That's the top model, where you can see the line goes all the way across to the charger. And then there's another model where the owner owns the charger, but still gets a rebate on it. And the way it works is that they're going to establish a baseline cost for the charger, which has not been established yet. That will be based on the low bid that they receive for a qualifying level 2 charger. And right now they're putting $2,000 out there as kind of a bogey for what that would be. And then there's 4 different models. There is multi-unit dwelling in disadvantaged communities, multi-unit dwelling in disadvantaged communities, in non-disadvantaged communities, workplace charging in disadvantaged communities, and workplace charging in non-disadvantaged communities. And you can see the rebate levels vary depending on which of those 4 models you qualify for. And then there's these cost formulas you can kind of figure out. And they've designed it so that they try to target so it's fairly even cost-wise depending on which of those models you choose. And they'll be very interested to see which sites choose to own the chargers themselves and which ones want PG&E to own and operate them. Of course, maintenance on these chargers can be an issue. So if you let PG&E own them, then PG&E is responsible for the maintenance. If you own them, then you're responsible for the maintenance. So that should be kind of interesting to see how this plays out. Minimum number of chargers that you need to put in is 10, however. So you need a site that can qualify for at least 10 chargers. And I'm not sure how that compares to the backmud program, but we'll hear about that. I think that's all. Okay, next topic. How many of you have heard of the Volkswagen settlement agreement? Okay, most hands there. Been in the news a lot. This is, bad Volkswagen, no donut. So Volkswagen, as part of their settlement agreement for selling diesel vehicles that emitted a lot more pollution than they were supposed to, has to spend $2 billion across the United States over the next 10 years for ZEV infrastructure and increased awareness of ZEVs. So ZEV outreach programs that do not specifically mention Volkswagen, so they can't tout themselves. 40% of that money has to be spent in California, so that's $800 million. That's based on the sales-weighted percentage of those diesel vehicles that were in California. So a lot of Californians adopted those diesel vehicles for fuel economy and thinking that they were clean diesel, which is how they were marketed. And so we get a lot of that money. It's a 10-year program divided into 4 30-month periods. The first 30-month period has already opened and I think closed, if I'm correct. So they're evaluating the first round of programs. I know a number of proposals went in for Northern California, including the Bay Area. And I'm not sure if anyone knows, Stan, when we're going to hear about that. Any Any idea? Yeah, we don't know when we'll hear, but maybe later this year, hopefully. And that slide was supposed to be taken out. So the goals of that program are to support transportation electrification, support the next generation of zero-emission vehicles, grow the state's burgeoning ZEV market, support access to ZEVs, including for low and moderate income consumers in disadvantaged communities. And so again, a lot of targeting disadvantaged communities here, and I think there's some interesting aspects to that we could get to maybe in the panel discussion. I'm certainly supportive of that, although it raises some interesting questions again. It could include installation of level 2 chargers, DC fast chargers, heavy-duty ZEV fueling infrastructure. I think Bill's going to talk a little bit about this later. And ZEV fueling stations, by which they mean hydrogen stations. There are no hydrogen stations applications allowed in the first phase, but we've been told that in the second 30-month phase, they will entertain proposals for hydrogen infrastructure. Next topic is hydrogen station progress. So this is the my current ride. UC Berkeley, we've been testing hydrogen fuel cell cars for actually about 10 years now. So we've seen a huge amount of progress. This is the new station in Hayward, California, which went in a couple years ago. Here are some other new stations. This is Mill Valley, Hollywood, Riverside, and Anaheim. So these have all gone in the last year or so. And then the big exciting news, which I'm sure some of you have heard about, maybe not all of you, is that we have 10 new awards in the last few months for Northern California hydrogen stations. So we're finally getting the love from Sacramento up here, where really they've been focusing on Los Angeles up until now. So under this grant funding opportunity 15-605, I calculated about $22.4 million of state money coming to support hydrogen stations in Northern California. And what's really interesting about this is that there were hundreds of proposals submitted, much more than the Energy Commission expected, which is kind of interesting. And what else do you notice about the station awards? See a familiar name up there? Shell. So many of these stations were awarded to Shell Oil. That's Equilon is a LLC tied to Shell. So this is really the first re-entry into hydrogen that we've seen from a major oil company. And it'll be very interesting to hear more about what their thinking is on this. I've been starting to talk to them. Suzanne and I are hoping to work more closely with them, particularly on the San Francisco stations. We were in our wildest dreams, we were hoping to get 2 stations in San Francisco. We thought it might be 1, and instead they came up with 3. So that's pretty interesting. Berkeley, exciting for us at UC Berkeley. Oakland, Walnut Creek, Sacramento, Citrus Heights, Campbell, Sunnyvale. So those stations should be in within about, they're supposed to be 18 months, but that's pretty optimistic. Looking at Chris Peoples here, who knows what it takes to put in a hydrogen station. But I think if they could get them in within the next 2 years, by this time, 2019, that's when this market can really start to evolve here in Northern California, because that's when it becomes practical for a lot more people to buy a Mirai. Matt Elke back there also just leased one, but we're limited to just this handful of stations right now. So if we could have this skeletal network more developed, I think that'll make it more attractive for a lot more people. How many of you live within 5 miles of one of those stations?
How about live or work within 5 miles?
Or live or work within 5 miles. So yeah, that's a lot. That's quite a lot. So I think if you can get within 5 miles and you're not deviating from your route very much, that's good. And I apologize. One side effect from going to Washington, D.C. last week was I came back with a bit of a sore throat. So bear with me. I'm assured I'm no longer contagious. And I'm glad to be back in California, I will say that, based on what's going on in Washington right now. So if you want to find out more about these stations, there's a station map that's available through the California Fuel Cell Partnership. And what you can do is you can click on any of those points on the map. It's an interactive map. And you can find out the status of the station, whether it's open, under development. Sometimes they go down for maintenance. So it's real-time information on station status. If you're heading down, you can actually now drive from Northern California to Southern California in one of these fuel cell cars because they have range of close to 300 miles. But you have to stop there in Coalinga at the Harris Ranch. So before doing that, you might want to check to make sure the station's open, because that's no place to get stuck, believe me, if you've been through it. So that's kind of a new tool. And then there's a new site, a brand new website that Frontier Energy, I believe, is behind, called h2stationmap.com, where they're now trying to show stations all across the country. So there's now a smattering of activity in the Northeast, I guess one station down around South Carolina somewhere. But we do expect to see a lot more activity in New England as well. Air Liquide, the French company, is apparently, and they're keeping this kind of on the down low, but we're hearing that they're working on 12 stations in the New England area. So that's where this could really start to become a bi-coastal phenomenon. So last thing I want to touch on is our NorthCat Center. This is a project we've been working on for a couple years to get the network established. Bunch of great, cool partners that you see listed down below there. Schatz Energy Research Center, Prospect Silicon Valley, Berkeley Lab, Center for Transportation and the Environment, a group called CalCharge, Battery Consortium, BKI, which is now part of something called Frontier Energy, the Bay Area Climate Council, and then the Bay Area Quality Management District that Changfeng represents. So the idea here, this is, you can read our mission statement, team of expert groups working to lighten load on our planet by accelerating the adoption of clean vehicles and vehicle fuels and advanced fuels. We have this website at northcat.org where we've listed a lot of resources and information sites. You can look at alternative fuel vehicle fueling maps, news items, upcoming events. You can contact us for more information and so forth. And so what we have is this network of physical sites where we can do training and education efforts, working with partner groups who might want to do road shows or trainings on the latest. We could work with CalStart, for example, on bringing north some of their efforts on medium and heavy duty vehicles and bring in fleet managers. We could do mechanics trainings. We're open to all sorts of ideas. The initial Energy Commission money only allows us to establish this network of physical training locations and kind of a virtual network. So we could have something going on in San Jose, but then have an audience in Sacramento or all the way up in Arcata, so that people don't have to drive all the way down to take part in an event. We could have sort of virtual multi-location trainings going on. So it's kind of the intent of this. So the next steps with that program are to leverage our partner capabilities to provide education and training opportunities for Northern California. We're also supporting an early effort to develop a Clean Cities Coalition in the North State, up around the Eureka, Ukiah, Arcata area. It's a very large area, so it's a little challenging for them, but we're working on that. And because the Energy Commission money, again, only allows us to kind of establish the facility, but not really to do any training activities, we're kind of waiting for the Energy Commission to make more funds available, but we're also looking for additional funds, working with industry groups, other universities, groups like CalStart, to actually do education and training around alternative fuels in California. So if you think you could benefit from that, or you have ideas for how we could leverage our resources and our expertise in ways that could help you, please contact us. So I think that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Tim. Up next, we're going to have Bill Van Amberg from CalStart. He's a gentleman I've had the pleasure of working with many times over the years, and CalStart and Clean Cities have a long history going way back. So it's really a pleasure to cross paths again, and let's see if I can get the right presentation up. Oh, fail.
You were real close, though. Doggone it.
I'm blaming it on the lunch. Now. Ta-da.
Beautiful. Thanks, Richard.
You're welcome.
Well, it's always tough to either go before lunch or right after lunch, so I know this is stupor that kind of sets in. We'll try and move through this, but I really appreciate being here, and it's been fun working with Richard and the Clean Cities and other groups for many years. It was fun when he organized the panel because he basically didn't organize the panel. I mean, it was an interesting email we got from Richard. I'm too busy. You guys just talk about whatever you want. I'm sure it'll be good. And you know what? I think it's working out, because I think we all have slightly different views. I'll probably be a mixture of future and what's coming over the horizon, what you can do now and what's coming next. So let's walk through that. And for those who don't know, CalStart is a clean transportation consortium, about 165 companies worldwide. So sustainable transportation, first of all, it's not the future. I heard today what you're all doing in sustainable transportation. It is now and it is growing. And the choice that we have is remarkable. I've been doing this for 25 years. You can tell by the gray in my hair that we had some tough early years. But it's right now we're at this point where we have an incredible choice. I'll just show some tiny little pictures because I couldn't get them all on one screen of all the choices we now have in clean and efficient technologies and fuels, and we heard many of them talked about. We've never had a better choice for things that are cleaner and more efficient, therefore more sustainable, and this is accelerating. There are more tools today than we've ever had for fleet managers to be able to get tools to make purchases today of what's available now, and to get involved in projects for things that they want to know about and maybe get involved in a demonstration project. There is more funding available in this state now than we've ever seen. But the bottom line is the choice is really all of yours. It's what do you choose to do next? The tools are there, the technologies are coming, and what fits with the way you do your business. So let's walk through just a couple of things that are more near term. So there is this great pot of money. It's called HVIP, which is a really long name that I hate to pronounce because it started out as the Hybrid and Zero Emission Truck and Bus Voucher Incentive Program. So that's why we just say HVIP. But right now you can get voucher funds for electric, hybrid, fuel cell, and natural gas trucks and buses. So this is aimed at the medium and heavy duty side. This is the equivalent of the voucher program or the rebate program on the light duty side, except this is designed for commercial fleets. We put out over 3,000 vehicles through this, and it's really a streamlined program. And we've done it as a voucher because it's a point of purchase discount. Fleets, you really don't want to wait around for tax credits. That doesn't generally do a muni any good, and it doesn't do commercial fleets, private fleets much good. So this has actually knocked off the price of the invoice when you buy the vehicle. The dealers really are the ones who run it. You go in, you order the vehicle, the voucher gets placed, and therefore it gets secured, so you know you have certainty of outcome. When the vehicle's delivered, that money's available. You don't have to write a proposal, wait to see if it's selected, then get under contract. As I said, that set-aside has really been an important thing for fleets to know they can purchase. And the state has really boosted the dollars. So if you're looking at zero-emission trucks and buses by weight class, it's probably really hard to read up there. It's on the website, californiahvip.org. But right now, if you were going to be a full-size transit bus, they're getting $110,000 or more. If you're into a Class 6 truck, you can look at the numbers there. You're talking about 90 to 100,000. So that's why we've really tried to find the number that will help people get over that first initial risk and cost barrier. Some of this, if it isn't all needed for the vehicle, can sometimes help you with your infrastructure. It also still funds hybrids, and we are also now funding low NOx natural gas. So the cleanest combustion engine on the planet. So there were some questions today about, well, gee, that's great for climate, but what about criteria emissions? The cleanest criteria emission combustion engine right now is the low NOx natural gas. It's 90% below the EPA 2010 standards for diesel. It's pretty clean. It's only out in one engine size at the moment. It's the 8.9 liter. We expect the 12 liter to come out soon, and that pretty much will cover medium duty trucks up through kind of the light class 8 regional trucks. So these are all the tiny pictures. We'll make these slides available. I took all of the eligible vehicles currently on the HVIP list, hybrid, electric, and the low NOx natural gas. And really, most platforms are going to be available, particularly though in electric, it's going to be in the class really 4 through 6 range at the moment. We don't have as much in the lighter end of the range, although we've got some hybrids and plug-in hybrids moving into that space. Ford has an EQVM program. So it's an electric qualified vehicle manufacturer that they use. And XL Hybrid has some units coming into that lower end of the space. So the hybrid side is starting to cover that, and I think in the next few years we'll see all electric in that lighter end. We're seeing the electric mostly in the medium duty kind of delivery sized vehicles or shuttle buses right now. And of course in full-size transit. This is a thing that I find really interesting in the signal of where things are going. You can see that we've been steadily growing the number of vouchers. We're measuring fleet demand that they've signaled to us, manufacturers' expected sales, new people moving into the market, and we're seeing this hockey stick upward curve in 2018. Well, that's pretty exciting. We've been working at this for a long time, but we finally now are starting to get a critical mass of enough products out there that are doing the job in the applications for which they're best fitting today, that we're getting this kind of an upward tick. Red is transit bus. So transit bus continues to be a beachhead market for electric drive, but that big blue area, that's trucks. And that's really pretty exciting. One of the signals, we're seeing Mitsubishi move into the marketplace. So California has a lot of very innovative companies who are making products. Motive, Phoenix, there's a variety of others. BYD now has manufacturing in the state of California. Now we're seeing Mitsubishi Fuso come in with a Class 5 electric truck by the end of the year. So this space is starting to grow. The other thing that's growing is the pipeline to keep innovation coming down the channel. And I know I didn't realize it was going to be so darn small in the back of the room when I put this slide together. Well, we've been working with the Air Resources Board to try and pull together their plan for 3 years worth of funding but not just the commercial purchase incentives, but for their demonstration projects and their pilot stage projects. We see a tremendous need to fund the right technologies in the right sequence over the next 3 years to drive change we need by 2030. So ARB is right now and actively putting this together. What it means for fleets is there's a real opportunity to take part in, if you're interested in what's coming with hydrogen, if you're interested in a heavier platform electric, there's real opportunities to get your nose under the tent and take part in some of these demonstration projects. So these aren't always for commercial products available today, but you'd be helping drive commercial products that'll be available in the 2018 to 2023 timeframe. So this funding chart that has no numbers in it right now is exactly where ARB is at, but we're really looking at the need to invest the cap and trade dollars on the order of, for medium and heavy duty, because it's such a breakout area now, $200 to $300 million a year. This is an important signal. If cap and trade is going to continue, we have to find those funds, but California right now is putting more money into this area than the entire federal government. And it is a pretty exciting time for this state to be able to be driving that change. That's the carrot. There are some sticks coming down the road. Now, these aren't so much sticks aimed at fleets. These are aimed at manufacturers. This came from a workshop that the Air Resources Board had just a couple of weeks ago. And they're looking at a zero emission rule for local trucks. So that would be delivery trucks, potentially refuse trucks, potentially drayage trucks eventually, meaning vehicles that haul cargo in our urban areas, not the long haul trucks going down the road. And they're toying around with these kinds of phase-in requirements, that a certain percentage of all trucks sold after 2023 might have to be electric. It's very similar to what they did on the light duty or passenger car side. Why this is important to fleets is this is another one of those signals. We're all talking about, okay, how do we get the OEMs more involved? How are they going to pay serious attention to this space? I got to give the state some credit and the air districts and others. We're trying to send a package of signals. Here's the benefits, here's the carrots, this is what you get if you come into the market. By the way, look out here on the horizon, you're going to have to be making things like this down the road. It's this combination of signals that we think is starting to get real attention. I'm doing an awful lot of briefings for major truck makers on electrification and other advanced technologies, because I think they're starting to see the writing on the wall and they're paying attention to it. So that doesn't mean you're going to see a Kenworth product tomorrow, but it does mean companies like Kenworth are taking this very seriously and are in a development cycle. So the other thing for fleets, and we heard some great discussion in here today about all the different strategies people are doing, because there really is no one path forward. There's no silver bullet to being more sustainable. We started a program with NAFA, which is the largest professional fleet organization in the country, and it's a sustainable fleet accreditation program. There's more than 50 fleets enrolled in it right now. And it was really set up to give fleets a way to set a baseline for their carbon and criteria emissions, and then make progress against a plan to reduce that over time. It's aimed at reducing fuel use, increasing efficiency, and cutting climate and criteria emissions. But it's wide open for how people do it. It doesn't mean you have to buy electric, because that may not work for your fleet. Doesn't mean you have to do natural gas. That may not work for your fleet. It's helping fleets start to quantify the reductions they get from a variety of things. For instance, we heard in here today, renewable diesel is a really good strategy. One of our highest scoring sustainable fleets actually went to R99 for renewable diesel. And it was a great strategy for them. It's not going to be the only strategy that will work over time, but it allowed them to start getting very active in this space. Now this is an even worse slide than any of the ones I put up before, because you can't read it at all, but the program is actually fairly simple, because what we do is we work with the fleets to collect the data you already have on your fuel use, the kinds of vehicles you have. We can capture that in a spreadsheet, quantify it, give you your scorecard, and then you give us your plan for what you plan to do over the next years. And in about 2-3 years, you come back and reaccredit, and we measure how well you're doing against your plan. Now, most of the fleets you heard talking in here today are already doing that. Many of you probably are too. But this allows you to compare apples to apples across all your strategies. And we're really pretty excited about it, and what all the innovation that's coming out of it, because as I said, there's no one way to succeed. Vehicle routing and the use of telematics, that's huge. People are getting some real great payback out of just that strategy today, or training your operators more efficiently. Idle reduction strategies are gigantic. We talk about the police departments. The use of stop-start or hybrid in police is really going to have a huge effect, because that's where a lot of their fuel use ends up being used. Sitting by the side of the road doing reports, checking on different things while they're waiting for the next action. Right-sizing fleets, and then obviously modernizing and fuel switching. There's a variety of strategies. So I kind of did this quick scan over the top. We're seeing a tremendous change and pace of technology. We're going to see more and more products that are going to give you more choices, but the real bottom line is what fits for you. Don't be, one of the things I've always loved about Richard, and he's always said, don't be afraid to take the next step. Just don't fail miserably when you do it. So
it's okay to fail a little bit.
Yeah. So you can do 10 or 5 or 20 or whatever the right number is. You don't have to do your whole fleet yet, unless you're sure about the strategy. But you do have to start moving out. But the thing that I guess I can say is I've seen more innovation in the last 5 years, and this is really similar to what Mary Barra started at GM, than we've seen, particularly in the medium and heavy duty side, in 50 years. So the pace of change is not only fast, but now the technology is finally robust enough that it's starting to deliver real good delivery on the service it needs to do in key applications. And I don't think, for instance, electric is ready for the heaviest applications yet as a product. But I think as we phase out from transit bus into delivery, into shuttle buses, into longer range delivery, we're going to see it faster than you think into heavy regional hauling trucks, Class 8 trucks hauling cargo around the region. So I think we all want to prepare for that. And it really can be driven by fleets. I will just say one last thing on that point. We've seen actually the power of fleet signal having some positive effect. It doesn't always work. You can't always get the OEM attention, but the first hybrids that got launched into the market came out of a national program we did with the U.S. Army, where we did pull together a number of the first large fleet demand for hybrids, and we got the OEMs to actually start building product. Right now we're doing a program with DOE, it's called EV Smart Fleet. It's an aggregated purchase with 16 different states around the country, West Coast and East Coast and a couple in between. But it's really going to be driven, the states don't buy that many vehicles. It's really going to be driven by municipal fleets, public fleets that want to bring their volume up through the state contract. So we would really encourage, if you want more information on that, please let me know, give me a call. Here's my contact information. We'd love to connect you into that. State DGS in California is the lead fleet for the state of California's effort. But we have states in the Northeast, the Pacific Coast, and a couple in between, as I said. but they're only going to get the real volumes to drive demand on the electric side, medium and heavy duty and light duty, if we get the muni fleets to say, yeah, we want you to do this, we'd be willing to buy if we got the right prices, and this is what we want. So I think if we can pool our efforts, we actually can drive more change. So thanks. I'm happy to answer questions after a bit.
Thank you, Bill. Up next, we have, and I always pronounce his name wrong, Shung Feng?
That's correct.
Close enough? Okay. He's from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and he's going to talk to you about some programs that they have going. And after that, we'll make the panel available for questions.
Thank you, Richard. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for staying until the last presentation. I'm the last one, right?
Yes.
And I just want to say one word on the title of my presentation. After hearing what Bill talked about sustainable transportation, I think the concept here, sustainable transportation is a broad concept that I can cover. So actually my focus will be on the funding opportunity to reduce emissions from mobile sources in the Bay Area. So that,
Enter.
Okay. So in this presentation, I will give you a brief introduction to the Air District, in case you don't know who we are. And I will briefly talk about the air quality and transportation in the Bay Area, and then some highlights on and our efforts to reduce emissions from transportation in the Bay Area. Then I conclude the presentation with the funding opportunities. So, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District is the first regional air pollution control agency in the nation, which was created in 1955 by the California legislature. And our jurisdiction includes the 9 counties surrounding the Bay Area. We have which covers more than 5,000 square miles with 7 million residents, and also more than 5 million on-road motor vehicles. Our mission is to protect and improve public health, air quality, and the global climate. So, how are we doing on the improving and protecting air quality in the Bay Area? If the 2 charts on the top shows the NOx excentric days and the PM days when the NOx or PM exceeds state or federal standards. That's the annual number. So that shows over the past 60 years, we have made substantial progress in improving air quality and reduce the number of days that exceed the ambient air quality standard. And to that extent that, as I mentioned, the Bay Area is home to more than 5 million on-road motor vehicles. The emissions from those on-road vehicles account for 40% of criteria emissions and about 36% of greenhouse gas emission in the Bay Area. So reducing emissions from the motor vehicles, on-road motor vehicles, is one of the key strategies to helping us attain and maintain the air quality standards and attain the greenhouse gas reduction target. The 2 strategies we are using, probably it's everyone knows that is to clean the vehicle and equipment, and also to encourage alternative transportation. The Bay Area District has authority over air pollution from stationary sources, but we don't have regulatory authority over mobile sources. That's actually ARB has the authority. So we, instead of using regulatory, or because we couldn't use regulatory ways to control and reduce emission from mobile sources, we use we provide financial incentives to help and accelerate development of clean air vehicles and also fueling and charging infrastructure in the Bay Area. And also actually we also sponsor projects for shore power that will help reduce emissions from marine vessels when they are at berth. And also we awarded the funding to the Cochrane electrification project. In terms of alternative transportation, we sponsored projects, we sponsored shuttle and rideshare projects, and also actually we are supporting a shared autonomous vehicles. I heard some of you talked about the autonomous vehicles. That's a project sponsored by the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, CCTA. So, and also actually we have funding. I will talk a little more details later. We have funding for bike facilities. Then next, so I will briefly talk about the efforts the Air District have to reduce emissions from the vehicles. And our funding have supported the purchase and lease of over 1,800 electric vehicles in the Bay Area, and support the installation of more than 1,100 public accessible EV chargers, and also 1,200 stations and 3 CNG stations. So the Bay Area now, based on our estimate, that the Bay Area is home to 91,000 plug-in or plug-in electric vehicles. That's about that's nearly 30% of the plug-in electric vehicles registered in California. If you consider we are only about 20% of the population of the state, so 30% is a very good number. And also our funding increased the public available chargers in the Bay Area by 24%. We estimate there are about 4,000 publicly available EV charging stations in the Bay Area. As I mentioned, also we provide funding for electrification of berths at Port Oakland, and also ground support equipment at San Francisco Airport, and also the Cochrane electrification project I mentioned before. Grant funding opportunities. So these projects were primarily funded through 4 we call it a renewable program, because through the Air District, because those we have kind of funding sources annually. So the Calm Year program, many of you might already know, that's a partnership between the California Air Resources Board and the Air District, which provide incentive for to private companies to purchase cleaner than required equipment that include on and off-road heavy-duty trucks, agriculture equipment, marine vessels, locomotives, and other diesel equipment. And the Mobile Source Incentive Fund is a local fund which is funded through a $2 per vehicle DMV surcharge. So that's about $11 million per year. That used to fund Calm Year projects. So if your project is eligible for Calm Year, it will be eligible for Mobile Source Incentive Fund. And the Mobile Source Incentive Fund also provide funding for school bus replacement, engine retrofit, and CNG tank replacement. And the Goods Movement program is also a partnership between the Air Resources Board and Air District, and also Seaport, which provide funding to reduce diesel emissions from diesel equipment, and for along the California freight corridor. So the equipment has to be freight related, and those include trucks, both dredge truck and on-road trucks, locomotives, hovercraft, ocean-going vessels, and cargo handling equipment. The Transportation Fund for Clean Air, that's also a regional fund, is funded by a $4 DMV surcharge, $4 per vehicle registered in the air jurisdiction. So it's about $22 million a year. 60% of the funds is directly awarded by the district, and the remaining 40% goes to the congestion management agencies in the 9 counties. So mostly from the clean air vehicle and infrastructure and trip reduction project. And so each year the board of directors of the air district approves the allocation of the funding to as a guideline for the expenditure of the transportation fund for clean air. So for fiscal year ending 2018, and the fiscal year 2018 starts from July 1st, 2017, and ends at June 30th, 2018. So $2 million has been allocated to bicycle programs, and $6 million has been allocated to trip reduction programs. That also includes shuttle and rideshare, and also pilot trip reduction program. And $14 million has been allocated to clean air vehicle programs, and that include electric vehicle and charging infrastructure, and also heavy duty vehicles and light duty fleet. So when we call it fleet, it's 3 or more vehicles that will be eligible for that program, and also light duty vehicle rebate program that opens to public agencies only. So the last slide I have is a little more details on the programs that the TFC program that are currently open and accepting for applications. The first one is the charge program that open to all entities, both public and private, and we have about $5 million available. It is awarded on a first come, first served basis, and the application deadline is July 28th. And also I have the website here, and if you're interested, you can find more information on the website. Also, the applicant need to attend a free but mandatory pre-application webinar. So you can find the information on the website, or you can talk to me afterward. And then the bicycle facility grant program, which opens to public agencies only, and also it has about $5 million, and it is a competitive program. So we are accepting application, and we'll evaluate the applications after the solicitation is closed on June 26th. For this one, the webinar is the attendance of webinar is not mandatory but encouraged. You can also find the information on the website there. And lastly, we plan to open a program that will provide funding for light duty fleet and heavy duty zero emission vehicles. If we are working on that, if you are interested, you can give me your card or let me know your contact information, or you can contact us by sending an email to grants@bdqfd.gov or visit our website, and we will notify you when there's any update to our program. Thank you.
Well, with that, I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. No questions from the audience yet. Let me start with one. This one's for Shang Shang. Do you know approximately the time frame when the zero emission light and heavy duty program might open? Maybe quarter?
Couple months.
Couple months?
Yeah. I cannot promise the timeline.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to pin you down, but there might be some fleets looking at some acquisitions where maybe it makes sense to wait a little bit. Anyway, that was one question that popped right to mind. You sir in the back.
Another question for Shane Tang. From one of your slides, you stated that 40% of criteria air pollutants in the Bay Area come from mobile sources, come from cars, trucks.
Uh-huh.
If the or the assumption is if all of those went to be electric, say theoretically, you'd immediately drop 40% of your criteria air pollutants, right? What would be the drop if all of those vehicles became modern? Or my question is, or curiosity is, if all of those vehicles were modern ICE vehicles with modern, most advanced catalytic conversion systems, how far would that drop be? Meaning, how much of the contribution to the criteria pollutants is the result of older, much more pollutive vehicles than modern ones?
That's a good question. And first, I want to clarify the 40%. So when we evaluate projects, we look at NOx, ROG, and PM. So there are other criteria pollutants like CO and SO2, because the Bay Area is a tenement area for SO2 and CO, so we didn't take that into account. And also that only include tailpipe emissions from the on-road motor vehicles. So it's not a life cycle analysis. And in terms of your question, if I understand correctly, is that the fleet is becoming cleaner and cleaner. So for the IC engines, their contribution to the emissions inventory will be smaller, but you have to consider actually the other sources also become cleaner.
Well, I guess my question was more, not all ICE vehicles are created equal. So one ICE vehicle could produce much less pollutants than another ICE vehicle depending on its age. So how much cleaner would going to all electric would be the cleanest, but how much cleaner is that than simply replacing the fleet with modern ICE vehicles?
I don't have the answer for you, but I like your question because I think you know the difference of older vehicles, older technology vehicles, and new technology vehicles. Actually, we do have a program that we call it a vehicle buyback program. We provide funding or rebate for people to scrap their older vehicles. For now, I think it's 1994 and older. So if you send vehicles to the scrap yard, and you will get, I believe it's $1,000. That's what I mentioned, vehicle retirement program. And so sorry, but if you, I think we can talk more offline about your question. Thank you.
Because what I was going to say is you have to remember that the new vehicles will be cleaner initially, but then even their emissions will degrade over time. Whereas with electric vehicles, as the grid gets greener, we expect electric vehicles to get cleaner over time. So they're kind of running in different directions. So, so it's a complicated story.
You had something to add, Kevin, or read it? No.
Well, by the way, on that point, we have actually done a lot in this state to take the oldest, dirtiest polluters off the road. There's been a lot of scrappage and other things. There's still more work to be done. But what we have also seen is that the transportation space hasn't been carrying its share as much. It is becoming a slightly higher percentage of carbon and to some extent criteria compared to the industrial sector, which is statewide, which is kind of interesting. So we all kind of have to take our fair share of reductions.
I had a quick question for Chung Fung, if I might.
Please.
I mentioned with the PG&E program, there's a minimum of 10 chargers for each application. We're actually trying to figure out if those all have to be at the same site or if it's just one organization and you could have 5 at one facility and 5 at the other and put them all into the same application. We haven't heard a clear answer on that yet because, again, PG&E is still putting out the details of that program. But with the Air District program, is there a minimum number of chargers that you have to apply for to qualify?
We have a minimum grant award amount that's $10,000. So you have to be eligible for $10,000. And our funding amount level is $3,000 per level 2 single port. So if you install 3 or more, not 3, probably 4. But we also have plus ups. So if it's a dual port, it's $4,000, and also solar and renewable energy. If you also install a new solar system, co-located with your charging stations, you qualify for more.
So I guess the punchline there is if you want to do 10 or more chargers, you might want to look at both of those programs and kind of weigh the pros and cons. If you want to do less than 10 but at least $10,000, then the Air District program would be the one of the most interesting.
Yeah, the PG&E program, I don't know last time I heard they are going to roll out in late fall.
They're saying the first installation's quarter 4 of 2017.
Okay.
But they're looking for 10 at a 10.
But they're looking for 10 at a
That's how
pop.
their pricing
Because-
is a 10 at a pop.
Yeah, because we first heard that the pilot program ultimately the goal for PG&E is to put in 25,000 charge points. And the early discussions were that the PUC was only going to allow them to put in 10% of those for the first phase, which would be 2,500. Somehow through negotiations, they got to 7,500 in this first round, but they want at least 10 per, so I guess that would be at least, no fewer than 7,500, 750 applications.
Now, Kevin.
Well, this is switching gears a little, but one of the critical factors in introducing alternative fuel vehicles in your fleet is matching the right technology with the right application. That's imperative. I think an increasing low number of cases where it doesn't work, it's because of a mismatch. So maybe this is more of a plug, but you all have really good educational components and outreach, Clean Cities and North Cat and AltCar, of course. But it still can be daunting to fleet managers, is what I've seen. Do you have any suggestions on where a fleet operator could start to get, because the vehicle technology is changing, the number of offerings is constantly increasing, so to get that right application for the right vehicle.
Sure. At the risk of sounding redundant, Clean Cities is one-stop shopping. They actually have online tools that help fleet managers do this exact thing. There's also a company, Carbon Blue, which I'm sure you're familiar with. That's their business. They want to help, especially smaller fleets, but all fleets, match their needs with the appropriate technology. And panelists may have some other suggestions. CalStart's another company that's engaged in that. And in fact, I think just going through that NAFA Sustainable Fleet Program, that can help you come to some of the conclusions that you may come to working with outside agencies as well. The main thing is to take a good look at what you got, identify your needs, and look what's available in vehicles and fuel. And then I think the secret is, how do you take all those ingredients and mix them together? Sometimes the solution is you go to a matrix and figure it out. Sometimes the solution is you talk to the manufacturer. To me, the best solution is talk to somebody that's doing it right now currently and see what their needs were and how it's working for them.
Yeah, I was going to say the comparable thing to what Richard said. I mean, first of all, I think fleet managers don't get, you know how when you're driving and you don't want to just look at one gauge? Don't listen to just one source. Make sure that you're talking to multiple people. I really would recommend that you work with your local Clean Cities. In fact, using the NAFA Sustainable Fleet Program, we really recommend that people use their their Clean Cities programs to help them kind of do some road mapping or working ahead of time. But I don't think there's anything more powerful than talking to like the people who are in this room. Find another fleet who's done it and say, well, what did you face? How did that work in that application? It didn't work so good, but it worked well here. Okay, good. They ground truth it, if you want to call it that, with some of your peers. And I found that most fleets get their best data that way, is work through their peers. So whether you do that through Clean Cities or with NAFA, or connect with CalStart and the fleets that are there, or use all the tools that are there, but I think hearing from real people who've done it always helps.
And just, to follow up on what Richard said with Carbon Blue, and I guess Sedale, Sedale's a great guy. He was here last year, for those who know Sedale. They do have an Energy Commission grant as well. So, obviously Carbon Blue, they're a consulting firm, they want to make money somewhere, but their grant did enable them to put an online calculator up, and I'm not quite sure exactly what the status. I think it's supposed to be up by now. They demoed it around this time last year, so I think by now it's up there. And it's supposed to be a free tool that you can use and put in your fleet information, and it pops up a whole bunch of alternatives that you can look at for electric, hybrid, so forth, and calculates costs and so forth. So I think that's live now, but if not, contact Sedale at Carbon Blue and see if maybe there's a beta that you could test if it's not fully online yet, but I think it probably is. So it's supposed to be a free tool for that application.
We had a question behind, Kevin, sir?
No, that's all right. Thanks.
No more questions? Additional questions from the audience?
Hey, one observation, Richard, because it came up earlier, and it's around LCFS credits, RIN credits, and how the heck do you navigate that? We had a webinar recently with transit property owners. So a lot of the folks in the transit world have been the first real big users of electric buses. And they have had to kind of go through this LCFS credit. I won't say it's a minefield, it's just a learning process. So there's a couple of fleets. Foothill Transit in Southern California is like really smart on this. They figured out how to make their business case pay off by getting the LCFS credits for the renewable electricity component. So there are some fleets who are on the leading edge of this. If you're interested in more info, let me know. But don't be afraid of it, because this, you want to, as you were saying before, Richard, you want to find all the tools that help makes your case work. And I'll tell you, when I've looked at the projections, if cap and trade and the low carbon fuel standard continue, and right now it looks like they will, those are going to be pretty valuable assets. There are some fleets nationally who have chosen to buy certain fuels specifically because they can get RIN credits and then in California LCFS, and when they stack those two together, they've got a heck of a business case for renewable fuel use. So don't be afraid of that. Start reaching out and trying to find out how to do it.
Good advice. Before we conclude, I just had some corrections to make. Now, the first one is me. I think I identified our hydrogen station as being in Hayward. It's actually in San Leandro. So I'm geographically challenged. And Tim, I had a comment. I noticed that the VW funding doesn't hit fuel cell until after the 30-month cycle.
That's correct.
So are we to interpret this to indicate VW will be coming out with a fuel cell in 29 months?
No, but what clearly the Air Resources Board clearly wanted them to emphasize plug-in electric infrastructure first, because their Energy Commission, as I mentioned, is already putting quite a lot into hydrogen infrastructure. But they did want to try to leverage that with the Volkswagen settlement as well in the second period. But yeah, Volkswagen's done fuel cell prototypes before, but I haven't heard any imminent introductions. But
it wouldn't be a Richard event without at least one lame joke, so I had to get in my quota. The slides will be available after this presentation. I would ask, I myself and any panelists that want to remain for networking, can we adjourn out to the plaza area in the vicinity of the fuel cell vehicles and the plug-in Clarity, our sponsors. Once again, want to thank... Oh, we might have some more coffee, and be sure to thank our sponsors, Honda, Toyota, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and our wonderful panelists. Thank you all. If you have suggestions for specific topics next year, just let me know and we'll get them on the agenda.
Nice to meet you.